We have today. We're going to talk about EVs and what some of the risks might be, and some new risks for electric vehicles that may not be considered yet. We'll talk about real estate and the housing market. There's a lot of questions about what people are predicting is going to happen with both rentals and ownership, and how mortgage rates are going to affect all that. We'll also touch on some what we call legal adjacent type subjects. If you have a dispute, a lawsuit with a neighbor or with another party, what options you have. Some of those options might be changing. And of course, no Describe TV episode is complete without talking about AI and how that's affecting jobs and the future job market. So, the first thing that is important when it comes to electric vehicles, what is the um, safety aspect, right? And a lot of times people talk about safety in terms of, is the car going to catch on fire? Is the battery any good? And that's part of it. But there's another risk factor that a lot of people are overlooking, and that is when it comes to charging. This is a troubling reason that more men own electric vehicles. You have to think it through. And obviously, you can probably figure this out. When you go to a gas station to fill up your car with gas, there are two differences between that and when you go to an EV charging station. One is that at the gas station, it can be filled up in a few minutes, right? An electric vehicle can take a half an hour to charge, meaning the driver is stuck at the charger. Well, it's more than stuck. You're sitting duck because any potential criminal, robber, anybody that has bad intentions knows that you are stuck there literally for some period of time, whatever that is. And you can't just drive away, because if somebody comes up to your vehicle, you're plugged in, right? You're not only tied to your vehicle, but your vehicle's tied to that location. It's almost like you're handcuffed to that location. And the other difference is gas stations have attendants there. So even if some robber came up and wanted to rob people at the gas station, there's an attendant there who presumably might observe it and have a phone that can call. EV chargers are often isolated at the far end of parking lots or in unpleasant neighborhoods. This creates safety issues for women. This is something we've talked about before. Back last year in 2022, we did a whole video about this, where if you are really anybody, but a female or woman or anybody who um, is worried about their personal safety, you may not want to be parked in a car in a parking lot where you can't quickly drive away. Look, not that men or women, anybody's any better or stronger, or, I'm going to stay away from that subject, but I would not want to be parked in a dark parking lot in a remote location where I couldn't immediately drive away, right? And I don't think anybody would. Doesn't matter who you are. But women are much more sensitive to this because they have a lot more at risk. So this is a reason that more men own electric vehicles, because they're more likely to maybe be able to see through this potential risk. How do you feel about it? Have you thought this through? Like the article says, if it's 8 o'clock at night and you're driving down the road and you need to top off your EV, have you thought about where you're going to park? Right? These EV charging stations are usually not in, right along the road. Like, think about gas stations where they are. They're right on the corner, couldn't be more conspicuous, because part of what makes a gas station successful is the drive-through, drive-by visibility. People want to pull in, get their gas, and get out in a minute or two. EV charging stations are more out of sight, out of mind, because they don't necessarily have that, at least at this point, necessity to be that conspicuous. So this is something that is a safety issue. One of the things that could make that easier is EV battery swaps, now as fast as filling your tank. So here's a startup called Ample, and they have a robotic swapping station where if a vehicle is manufactured in a way that the battery can come out and go back in, instead of having to plug in and wait for the electricity to go into your existing battery, they'll just swap out your battery. They'll take out your old battery, put in a new battery in a few minutes. Now, there's a couple problems with this. First is the vehicle has to be manufactured in a way that the battery is removable. There are no electric vehicles at this point that are set up that way. The other thing is, even if they're set up that way, it has to be compatible. Think about all the different sizes, shapes, and configurations of electric vehicles, many of which the battery is a structural component of that vehicle. This doesn't seem like a very practical way to do fast charging. Who knows? Maybe 5, 10 years down the road, this will be the way it is, and the batteries are compatible and they can swap them out. It's unlikely because you have to get all the manufacturers together. They all have to agree on a standard, they have to agree on a size, shape, and it may not fit every vehicle. The other problem is it creates another safety issue, right? If your battery is that easy to take in and out, why wouldn't they get stolen? Look, people are spending putting themselves at risk with an electric saw and climbing under vehicles to steal a $200 catalytic converter, right? Catalytic converter theft is rampant. So if a battery is easy to swap out, then what's going to keep criminals from just stealing batteries out of car? If they'll do it for 200 or 300, of course they're going to do it for 10,000 because that's how much a battery costs. So I don't see a lot of future with this. Tell me what you think in the comments, but this seems like a good idea in theory, hypothetically, but in practice, I don't know where this is going to go. Last one is they're talking about this is good news, a way to do charging for apartments, right? So if you have an apartment building or you're a landlord of a multifamily property, it's kind of difficult to create charging stations for your tenants. And if you live in a state where electric vehicles are going to be required in 5 years, 6 years, whatever it is, then you might have to find a way to provide that to your residents, EV chargers for all. And what they're talking about doing is creating an EV charger, which is a solid state. And the reason for that is that some zoning and some permitting makes it difficult to install a traditional charger in a multifamily type property. There's hurdles to installing this, right? Because of the cost and also because of installing the charger in a building. You see somebody that has to put a cord outside because they don't have a garage to put in. Several states have passed right to charge laws that allow renters to install in a multifamily, but they have to pay for it, right? If you can't charge your car at home overnight, it kind of defeats the purpose of an EV, because that's what makes these vehicles more convenient or more viable. If you have to charge during the day at work, now you have to count on the fact that your employer has one, or you can find a parking lot. A large segment of renting households, charging from home is a possibility, not a guarantee. 14 million households rent single family homes, another 2 million rent mobile homes. So now you have, roughly 20% of the population, no, I'm sorry, roughly 7% of the population that has difficulty getting a charger. Some states have passed laws that allow renters to install them. But even if the law forces the landlord to let you put one in, first of all, you still have to pay for it. Second of all, you have to have the permitting and zoning for it. Many multifamily properties, the way they're configured, you can't get permitting for this type of electrical circuit in the building. What about liability? California requires liability insurance for the person to recover damages. Well, that tells you right there that there's a risk for that installation to create hazard for the other tenants. What about this? Once installed, many rental home and apartment owners have in their leases that any improvements made to the property belong to the owner. So you spend $4,000 or $5,000 to install an EV charger, and then you move out, landlord gets to keep it, right? So These are significant problems, but there's some companies that are creating um, different products that you can install that make it a little bit easier. Problems for landlord, apartment renters dilemma when viewed from the building owner. Why should I take on the cost of installing chargers when most of my tenants don't have EVs? Well, this is highly likely because electric vehicles are more expensive than a traditional vehicle. By definition, more renters have lower incomes than homeowners. Not always the case, right? There's a lot of high-end renters, but if you're a landlord, why would you want to spend all that money to put in chargers when your tenants may not need them? It's cart before the horse, right? So EV charging is still kind of an obstacle. And when you look at trying to roll this out to a large percentage of the population, especially in urban areas, these are where there are more renters in urban areas, downtowns, even the close in suburbs. There's a lot of apartment buildings. How can you put charging stations in an apartment building? Most of the time, if you look at a parking lot like at Target or Walmart, there's maybe 7 or 8 chargers at the outside of this parking area. There might be 100 cars in it because not everybody needs it. But if you are planning an apartment complex charging infrastructure, think about it. You have 200 tenants, right? You have 200 units, let's say 200 units. Well, on average, each unit might have 1.5 cars. Some people are single, some people are a couple, right? So now you have 300 cars. In 2030, if your state mandates higher percentage EVs, even if 20% of the vehicles are EVs, that's 60 electric vehicles that want to plug in overnight, because you're not going to ask somebody to plug in when they get home at 6 o'clock and then get up in the middle of the night to switch it out so somebody else can do it. You have to have enough plugins for all of the potential EVs in your census, in your population of your building. So you have to install 60 EV chargers. Well, at even if you do it in bulk and you do 4,000 a piece, right? You're talking $250,000 improvement to your property. Is that going to get you any more rent? Maybe not. Who's going to pay the electric bill? Right? Is your tenant going to pay the electric bill? You have to have separate meters for each one, which makes it more expensive. How are you going to make sure that they're used properly, that they're up and running? This is going to also require more maintenance expense. Some of the surveys that are out there right now say that over 20% of EV chargers are out of service at any given time. These things break. So now you have to have a maintenance person or company keep the EV chargers up and running. So these are some potential obstacles that need to be overcome for electric vehicles. Um, Keeping to the theme of real estate and housing, we're going to jump to housing market news and why there's a certain type of mortgage that's disappearing that might be a serious impact on new homeowners and entry level buyers. Be back in 1 minute.
Are you tired of dealing with automated systems and chatbots for your important service needs? Introducing ActualHuman.com, the solution you've been waiting for. ActualHuman.com connects you with licensed and certified professionals who understand your unique needs. Need advice? Have questions? Our experts are here to help. Say goodbye to impersonal automated responses. With ActualHuman.com, you'll have peace of mind knowing you're getting expert guidance from a real person. Our professionals are knowledgeable in their fields, ensuring that you receive top quality advice and information. From cybersecurity to real estate, we've got you covered. ActualHuman.com, connecting you with real professionals who care about your needs. Experience the difference. Visit ActualHuman.com today. Expert guidance.
All right, we're back. We're going to talk first about mortgages and the cost of buying a house. This was a really big deal article that came out this week tracking what it costs to buy a house. And they talked about how to afford a $500,000 home, right? And you might think, well, 500,000 sounds like a lot. Well, it depends on where you live. In many areas, across the country, the median price of a home is right now about $460,000, 460. So 500 isn't much more than that, and that's the median. So there's a lot of metro areas where 500 gets you basically an average house. So if you're going to buy that house, you need to make $142,000 a year. Now, certainly there's people that make that. That's in a lot of areas, that's not a huge amount of money, but it's also not an entry level type buyer. Even though mortgage rates are sliding, home prices have dropped, but it's not enough for wary Americans to jump back into the market because if you do the math, 30-year fixed mortgage at today's average rate is 6.67. And I have to tell you, that's low. Most of the rates we're seeing now for most buyers are over 7, right? So that's going to put you close to 4,000 a month after taxes and insurance. Considering most lenders want you to keep housing expenses at or under 30% of your gross, you got to make 142. It's really closer to 150. By the time you figure in that you're not going to probably get a 6.7 or 6.6 rate. You're probably going to be 7.0, 7.1, which means you're probably going to have to make about 150 to afford the mortgage. So 2-income household, that may not be that difficult, but for single income borrower, that's going to be a big deal. The other thing is there's a type of mortgage is disappearing, and that is a mortgage for 150,000 or less. And you might think, well, I'm not buying a house that cheap. Well, that could be true, but in order to keep the market moving, in order to keep the market viable, there has to be that entry level buyer out there. And we've done, videos all the time about the fact that there are many homes that are available in that price range. We have a series called Homes Cheap where we feature homes that are under 200,000. In reality, we're going to up that in the next week or two to under 250, mostly because of inflation and because there are still homes for under 200. But if you bump it up to 250, you really open up the landscape to a lot more house. And the fact that this is happening, lenders are less likely to want to do a mortgage for 150. And the reason why is because for a typical lender, it might cost them 7 or 8,000 to originate a loan. So under 150 have become increasingly rare because the origination fee or the origination costs for the lender are difficult because of policies that made it difficult for borrowers looking to finance a low-cost home. Regulations enacted were aimed at protecting borrowers. Mortgage lending has become more expensive for lenders. So if you're a lender and you're going to lend 150, you're not going to make enough money off the interest over the course of that loan to pay back what it costs you to originate that loan because of all the fees you have to pay. So if you're a borrower or a buyer looking to access a small mortgage, and they talk about people of color, rural communities, that kind of thing, you're going to have a tough time getting a mortgage, even if you have the income, even if you have the credit, even if you have the job security. The lenders aren't going to want to do that kind of a loan just because they're going to lose money on it, right? So that's going to affect the whole market. If people can't buy those homes, those people move up to other homes and free up properties for inventory. Who is doing okay in the housing market? Well, it's not buyers, it's not sellers. It is somebody you might not expect, home builders. Home builders right now are doing fairly well. Even with high interest rates, there are a group of people, a subset of people who are able to buy houses even with the higher rates because they have the income, because they have the job security. Do they want to buy a new house or a resale? They're probably going to buy a new house. Confidence among builders is in the positive territory, first time in almost a year, right? So little inventory available that it's pushing buyers to pay the premium for houses. Because if you can't find a resale house, just build a new one. KB Homes, their CEO says, we're pretty pleased. Imagine that. A builder pretty pleased. Enthusiasm is more shovels on the ground. So they're building new houses. This is a big deal. This is something where it shows that there is a demand for a nice house, even if you have to pay a higher price, even if you have to pay a higher interest rate. Demand for nicer houses is there. What about commercial? Office real estate crash will be so sharp that office values are likely to recover by 2040. That's more than 15 years away. They're talking about the commercial side being slam dunked because of work from home. People don't want to be in the cities. AI, we'll talk about AI jobs coming up. There's millions of jobs being lost from AI taking over employment. So on the commercial side, office real estate values is plummeting. Now you might think, well, why not just convert all these to residential? We'll touch on it briefly. We've covered this before, and we'll do another video on it next week. It's not as easy as it seems. You got to remember, an office building was originally constructed for wide open space in that office. So if you want to chop it up into individual apartments, you could do that. But here's the problem. First of all, you have to run all new utilities, plumbing, electric, sewer, gas lines. Anything that has to be supporting each unit has to have a separate connection. Number two, you have to have a place for those connections. You have to have what's called a chase, or some dedicated space where all those can go and then branch out to each floor. The bigger problem is this. When you have an open office space and the whole floor is open, maybe with a few walls, you get exterior windows you can see out no matter where you are, because the floor is all open. As soon as you start chopping it up to apartments, you can't put apartments in the middle of that building, because most residential zoning requires that you have an exterior window. If you have an apartment that's in the middle, first of all, nobody would want it if you don't have a window. Second of all, you aren't going to be able to get it past zoning or permitting because you don't have a exterior window. It doesn't even have to be an egress window, because obviously a high rise, you can't get out that window, but you have to have an exterior window for light or for safety from fire. Here's the other problem. If you imagine a large scale residential type property, think of a hotel. Hotels are flat, right? Look at a hotel. It's got a hallway in the middle and then rooms on each side. Apartment building, same thing. Hallway in the middle, rooms on each side. Commercial buildings are more square because you don't need to have that narrow form factor to have windows on more than one side. You can make it bigger. It's cheaper to build them that way because you have less surface area for the square footage, but it's not really conducive to switch over. Last, we'll talk about mortgage rates. You can see here that you're 6.62 on average, but that's with 20% down and good credit. Resilience in the housing market as Powell sees more hikes ahead. Okay, well, who are we talking about? Fed Chair Powell. He's the person who decides on interest rates. He gave his regularly scheduled congressional testimony. He is seeing that there are going to be more rate hikes. He's predicting this. Probably not in the next year, but more rate hikes are coming. So if you are a buyer/borrower, you can expect that probably in about a year, it's going to start creeping up again, right? And maybe going up into the 8 to 9% range. We've seen some predictions we talked about last week where interest rates could be at 10% by 2025. If you have a 10% mortgage on a $500,000 house, now you're not talking about $4,000 with tax and insurance. You're talking about almost $6,000, depending upon what market you're in, especially if you're in a high tax or high insurance area like Florida, California, those kind of places. You're going to be talking $6,000 a month to buy a $500,000 house. So keep that in mind. So next we're going to talk about AI and job losses, and how that is a really serious risk for a lot of employees. Your job may be at risk. We're talking in some industries 80%, especially for women. We're talking about millions of jobs being lost. So we're going to set that up on the screen here. We'll be back in about 20 seconds. Well, here we go. First thing is from CNN Business. 80% of women's jobs could be disrupted. That sounds like a pretty significant number, right? So why isn't anybody talking about this? If 80% of women's job could be disrupted or automated by AI, why is this not a big deal? More prime working age women are employed than ever before, but that could be completely thrown on its head, where 8 out of 10 women workers could be affected. This is staggering. Chief economist from ZipRecruiter. Now, this is a company this should know. ZipRecruiter is one of the largest online job platforms, and their chief economist is saying that it's staggering that 8 out of 10 women workers could be affected. That's huge, right? And there are legitimate reasons to be worried that some gains could be eroded. Technologies will create opportunities, but some could be eroded. The key is, how do you become the one who benefits from this? Number two, here's an example of a particular employer, major publishing house, to replace hundreds of jobs with AI. A tabloid owned by European marketing. The tabloid will unfortunately be parting ways with colleagues who have tasks that in the digital world are performed by AI and automated processes. This is one anecdotal example, but it just shows where if you have this company with 800, another company with 800, another company with 1,000, this is where the jobs go. How many are we talking about? Well, a job apocalypse is coming, as bots could take 1 billion jobs from people and they will be better than humans. So it's not like the company's going to lose out on anything. They're actually going to gain by doing this. Tech chiefs have sounded the alarm as the world rapidly embraces AI, done entirely by a machine. Tech experts have warned that up to 1 billion jobs could be snatched from humans. Some estimates have put the figure close to 1 billion, up to 800 million, facing the automation axe. Ethical AI Institute of Oxford said this figure sounds worrying realistic, and there is a deep impact on the job market. So AI and robots will be better at humans at their jobs, further hammering home the need for massive societal readjustments. What does that mean? Well, they're going to have to find some way to support all these people that lose their jobs, right? I think this is something we should be worried about. These technologies are stepping into areas that normally would require human to human contact. I mean, this is tremendously troubling. Now, how much of this comes true or not, who knows? But according to the Wall Street Journal, artificial intelligence may eliminate some jobs. This is from the Chat GPT developer. They sought to walk a fine line on the impact. Sure, they want it to be successful, but they're also concerned that it could affect people at the same time. Every company has a large army of people that read and review contracts, and those are all at risk, right? A company that uses AI to double the amount of computer code will need more employees for other things, but the coders may not be able to do those other things. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. What do you think about your job? Is there a risk that your job is one of those some jobs that could be lost to AI? And if it is, what are your plans to do about it? The next thing we're going to talk about has to do with this. It's personal finance. What do you do about your personal finances? Not only because of AI, but also just in the general intention to have a secure, financially comfortable life, lifestyle, and also a retirement. Be back in less than a minute.
Are you tired of automated systems and chatbots when you need assistance? Experience actualhuman.com and connect with real professionals, not automation. At actualhuman.com, we bring you a network of professionals who are excited to answer your questions and provide guidance. Getting started is easy. Let us show you how. Here's how it works. Step 1. Select the best date and time for your video call. Step 2. Describe your situation and the areas you're looking for advice. Step 3. Connect one-on-one with an expert and get the undivided attention that you deserve. Experience the difference. Visit actualhuman.com today and schedule your professional consultation. Actualhuman.com. Expert guidance from real people.
So here we go. Just to remind everybody, AI could automate 70% of work. And this is from Adobe's HR chief on its no mass layoffs playbook. So this is something that is affecting everybody's job, even if you're not directly impacted by AI. Look, if you're the hot dog cart vendor out in front of a commercial building and everything goes to AI, you're not going to have as many people buying hot dogs, no matter what it is. So what do you do about it? Well, first thing is, this is from Motley Fool. You should focus on a passive income, not a side hustle. Think about those two things. Hustle means work. If you have a side hustle, it just means you're doing more work. The whole idea of something on the side, is trying to not do more work. If you want to do more work, just take a second job, right? Most side hustles actually are more work and less money than your primary job. You go to work, boss tells you what to do, you kind of maybe do 70 or 80% of it, and you get a paycheck on Friday. Now, it's a pain in the neck because the biggest thing is control over your time and what you do. It's not so much how hard the work is. If you create a side hustle, you make a food truck, you maybe sell Amway, you do something on the side, the work is very hard and you probably don't make a lot of money. More important is look at the income. How can you make income? Because once you create a role, an enterprise, some little business that makes income, now you can make it passive. No matter what the role is, what the job is, once you do the work to create income, now you can delegate and outsource the workflows to a third party, whether it's on Fiverr, whether it's a virtual assistant, whether it's automation. Now you can use AI to create an income, much more important than a side hustle. There's nothing to brag about if you're just hustling in your spare time. Your spare time should be spare. It shouldn't be used to work harder than you do with your job. Passive income allows you to earn money while you sleep, or at least while you do something that's less intensive. What's the difference? Side hustle generally refers to a job or project you work, keyword work, on outside your 9 to 5. It involves actively earning money by performing a service or selling a product. Food delivery, tutoring, writing, that kind of thing. Sure, you can make money doing that. Passive income is more security because it doesn't take up any more time. And here's the thing. We've referred to this before as what we call the dentist problem. The dentist problem. A dentist is a high income job. If you're a dentist, you make a lot of money. Dentists can make 4, 5, 600,000 a year, 800,000 a year. But there's a limit because the dentist, each appointment you take takes a certain period of your time. Even if it's a half an hour appointment, you have a 7-hour day, you can maybe do 12 dental appointments a day. Once you get to 12 appointments a day, you can't take anymore. You can't grow your business any bigger unless you hire another dentist. But now your job is not just being a dentist. Now you're managing another dentist, right? So at that point, now you have become a dental practice, not just a dentist. So the dentist problem can extend to side hustle too, because if you have a side hustle, you only have so much time to hustle that you can, or even if you want to. If you want to work your whole weekends, your days off, evenings, you don't want to do that. Sure, at first you'll need to put effort into it, but in the long run, you want to have security, which means you spend a little bit of time overseeing it, managing it, delegating it, but it's not taking up your whole time. What trait do you need? Well, Mark Cuban, one of the Shark Tank panelists, um, shares one thing most people don't have. It's the one thing you can control. What is that? Right? The one thing you can control in your life is your effort. Be willing to do something that's a huge competitive example. What is that thing? Well, being willing to do something, being willing to put in effort. Putting in effort means going beyond what's required to solve problems, even when you aren't asked to. This is a good metaphor for creating that passive income versus a side hustle. At first, it might be a hustle. That's the extra effort. But at some point, it becomes you deciding, I want to make this work. Instead of just saying, somebody telling you to do A, B, and C, you'll also know that D, E, and F exist. You'll know what else is out there beyond the basics. And it's his advice is for anyone to go the extra mile. Don't apply for a job with me if you don't go the extra mile. Well, forget about a job somewhere else. Think about your side hustle or your extra income. Go the extra mile for that to make it a passive income and not just a side hustle. Last, another expert, Dave Ramsey, warns of a disadvantage to a 401k. And they're a good option because usually you have matching. Social Security will probably run out in about 10 years. So if nothing is done, you need to have a 401k because you're not going to have any money. But a Roth 401k has something that is a benefit because you can have tax-free withdrawals in retirement. So you pay taxes as you make the contributions and you have less taxes when you take them out. Again, we're not attorneys, we're not investment advisors, but this is something to take into consideration when you're deciding. Taxes may be higher when you retire, so pay them now. A Roth 401k means you pay the tax when you put it in, but when you take it out, it's tax-free. Not only will tax rates be higher, likely, but also the amount will be higher because it will have grown. So having that option considered, maybe you layer it. Maybe you put somebody into that, somebody into a traditional 401k. It's a good piece of advice. That wraps it up for our episode for today. Next time, we'll talk about some legal issues from investigations to mediation to finding an attorney. And make sure you bookmark our content, and we'll see you on the next video.